Some years ago now, in one of my churches, there was a man named Eddie who had significant learning disabilities and a deep faith. He had a joyful spirit and loved to sing. He also worked as a grocery bagger at a local grocery store, of all things. But he was so warm and friendly, so caring to everyone who came through the checkout line, whatever their age, that people would change checkout lines to get into his line. They would get in his line even if it was twice as long as anybody else's. Kids adored him, but so did adults. He transformed the chore of grocery shopping into a spiritual moment where people felt cared for. He had a ministry. Now, I would not have said that bagging groceries was work that you could do for God. But Eddie showed me I was wrong. He showed me how knowing God shaped my interactions, whether I was at a store, at work, whether I was talking with a stranger that I would never see again, or a person that lived close to me. In the church where Eddie and I were together, they had in the bulletin every week, Pastor, the Reverend Paige Bessie Rankin, ministers, all believers. They all understood themselves to be ministers on God's behalf, which is consistent with the faith of the Reformation, which had focused on the priesthood of all believers, which has kind of become ministry of all believers. It comes with the recognition that we all have gifts, that we all have ways to serve. But what Eddie reminds us is that how we do that and where we do that isn't always obvious along the way. Some years ago, I went to a conference by the ELCA, Evangelical Lutheran Church, when I was on loan serving as a pastor for them. And they shared with us this video that invited us to reflect on how and where we can serve God. So with luck, here comes the video.
Last Sunday, our pastor talked about vocation.
She said something like, we're all called to live out our vocation.
Something about ministry in our daily lives.
How is God calling you to use your gifts?
Pretty sure she's encouraging us to find more time to volunteer at church.
And I would love to. Our church has so many great things to be involved in.
Tons of opportunities to serve on committees and lead in our worship services.
We've got great youth activities and choirs.
We serve at the local food pantry. We help serve meals at our shelter.
But honestly, where do you find the time?
When I'm not at this desk, I try to find some time to spend with my friends.
Classes, basketball, student government.
Making sure the kids are taken care of, and I have my own parents who need my attention now.
So find time to live out my vocation?
I would love to, but with all my responsibility with student leadership at school, how do I have time to do, what does my pastor call it, ministry in daily life?
Maybe after I catch up on my workload, I'll figure out how to use my gifts. Jerry, that hail damage insurance claim from this morning, can you make sure that check is processed today? I really want to make sure the Johansons can pay their bills.
I'll think about it. I'll try to find the time to figure out what God is calling me to do. Hey, wait a second. Come here. Remember, God loves you. And I do too. Have a great day. Huh.
I thought that was a kind of really clever way to explore the reality of that we serve, that we use our gifts, not just by what we do here in this place, although this church does some amazing things, and you all come together to do some amazing ministries, but that our ministries are not limited to what we do here, and that you bring those gifts with you out into the world to serve. Each of those gifts unique and special. One of the things I think that 1 Corinthians 12 reminds us is that we have all different kinds of gifts, but they come from the same Spirit, that they're all precious and valuable and important. I had a philosophy professor in college who had a great debate with us once about which jobs were most important in the world. And, was it doctors or was it, teachers or nurses? And he came up with garbage collectors. And if you think about that now, many of us are in communities where we have to actually take our own trash to the dump. But even there, people who work at the transfer station that think about if our world didn't have people who managed our waste, I think we'd be kind of noticing a huge difference. But societally, we don't always recognize that gift as precious and important. Or the people who make our French fries, or the people who are out in the fields picking our food. There are some that our society lifts up as sort of being more important, more socially valued. And yet, what 1 Corinthians tells us is that although there are varieties of gifts, varieties of ways of serving, it's all in the name of the same Spirit. It's all precious in God's eyes. Frederick Buechner, who was a New Hampshire pastor and a chaplain, takes it kind of a step further, and he says when we're thinking about where God is calling us, recognizing our gifts is an important part of understanding that calling. He writes in his little theological dictionary, Wishful Thinking, this definition of the word vocation, which you may have heard before because it is, I think, beloved by many of us. He says, vocation comes from the Latin vocare, to call, and it means the work of humans is called by God. There are all different kinds of voices calling you to all different kinds of work, and the problem is to find out which is the voice of God rather than society, say, or superego, or self-interest. By and large, a good rule for finding out is this: the kind of work that God usually calls you to do is the kind of work that A, you most need to do, and B, that most needs to be done. If you really get a kick out of your work, you've presumably met requirement A. But if your work is writing TV deodorant commercials, maybe you've missed requirement B. On the other hand, if your work is being a doctor at the leper colony, you have probably met requirement B. But if most of the time you're bored and depressed by it, the chances are that you've not only bypassed A, but probably aren't helping your patients much either. Neither the hair shirt nor the soft berth will do. The place God calls you to is a place where your deep gladness and the world's deep hunger meet. I love that. Listen to that again. The place God calls you is the place where your deep gladness and the world's deep hunger meet. And so we are all gifted in one way or another. We all have opportunities to serve, whether it's bagging somebody's grocery, mowing somebody's lawn, collecting trash, teaching, nursing, parenting, so many different ways. I think the challenge is in the church that we talk about that. We talk about how we are all ministers, but when I ask people about that, like, what is your ministry? Where do you feel called? Most people sort of look at me puzzled and go, you're the pastor. What are you talking about, right? And I've done a lot of reflection about that through the years. And I think that although we say that we all have ministries, we really only kind of like lift up and authorize a few in the life of the church. But I think the church should be a launching pad and a support mechanism for all of our different kinds of ministries. A place where you come to feel empowered and charged up and challenged to take those gifts back out into the world. Because although what we do together is so important, when we expand our reach to where all of our lives go, we see ourselves as having a much bigger impact. So, I'm going to ask you to stretch yourself just a little bit this morning and find somebody near you. And I want you to speak for a minute or two about where you think maybe you have a ministry of some sort. If you're struggling with that, maybe your friend can help you, who knows you, to identify a gift or help you to recognize a way that you are using your gifts on God's behalf in the world. to take a minute to share that with one another as a way of starting to name and claim these ministries. All right? On your mark, get set, find somebody in chat. If you haven't both had a word yet, make sure you swap around so both people get to talk. I'm going to invite you to wrap up your conversation. And I'm going to invite you to do something more. Because if our work together is to empower and to lift each other up in these kinds of ministries, I'm going to invite you to pray for your partner's ministry in the week to come, but also maybe to check back with them at some point. How are things going in your ministry? How are you feeling connected? Where do you need support right now? Because I think at its best, the church can support us and empower us and to help us to see things through these eyes, through this lens. It's so easy, I think, when we get out past this place to kind of get distracted from this way that Christ has put before us and to lose track that, gosh, when I'm in the grocery store or I'm doing laundry or I'm paying bills, God help me, that I'm about God's work in those moments and to think about how that shapes and influences how I am and who I am. Even if I never say Jesus to the person I'm interacting with, I can express and show and share the love of God and embody that grace in the way that I am in the world and the way that I'm ministering. So praise be to God for all of you, for the ways that you share your gifts in this place, but also the ways that you take those gifts out into the world to do God's work. May you recognize that we are all empowered by the same Spirit. We all have gifts to bring, each of them different and unique, but precious in God's sight. May God bless you in this.